All right, guys, I'm going to kick things off. It's 6:02. Today is Tuesday, November 4th. We're here in beautiful Bali, mixing it up a little bit. We're outside in the cafe, out in the fresh air. Yeah, looking out at the rice fields. The sun is going down. Obviously, we do this every week. For you folks online, if you find yourself in Bali, I hope you'll join us. We do this every Tuesday night at Ubud, which is the co-working space here in downtown Ubud in Bali. The way it works is all week, the participants post their stories on the Facebook group called Bitcoins in Bali, and then we get together on Tuesday nights and talk about it. We've got a really great show tonight. We're going to be talking all about regulation, which I'm sure just sounds very exciting to all of you. We're going to try and make it interesting. There's lots of things happening in that part of the Bitcoin universe, so we're paying attention. So stick around for that. We've got some local announcements too. So let's kick it off. I'm going to share the screen here. Just bear with me. There we go. All right, so local announcements. This Saturday, we're going to have our Bitcoin 101. Obviously, this is for total beginners. Some people show up on Tuesday nights and we get into this really heavy technical discussion, and some people are beginners. They just want to get the basics. So we do this once a month, every second Saturday. We get together, you bring a few rupiah, and you leave with a few Bitcoin plus the knowledge on how to use it. So that's this Saturday and every second Saturday. So obviously everyone here is not a beginner, so tell your friends. We'll be here this Saturday at 10 a.m. In other news, on the 5th of December, we're going to kick off the Bali Bitcoin Binge, where we're going to take over the store for 2 weeks. We're going to set up a couple rooms with bunk beds, and there's 3 rooms with ensuite bathrooms. And presumably we've already got people signed up, but people are going to be traveling from all over the world to be with us. We're going to have 2 weeks of programming, which even if you're not living in the house, you can participate in. But the idea is that you can come here, live and work, and get your Bitcoin project off the ground with this 2-week Bitcoin adventure here in Bali. So take a look at the website. It's at balibitcoinbinge.com. And take a look and join us if you can. And stay tuned. We're going to be having a lot of activities where you don't have to be living in the house to participate. So all the details are there on the website. Okay, let's talk about price. The price continues to slide. I think we're down another 6 or 7% this week, down to 325.85 at the moment. On the global scale, the market cap, all Bitcoins in existence are worth just over $4 billion. But you can see we're keeping company with the likes of Mozambique and Tanzania now. We're ranked 103rd of 190 currencies around the world. So in terms of N1 money supply, or the money that circulates in the population, if the internet were a country, it would be ranked 103rd of 190 countries. So we've seen that number go as low as 89, 88 back in its heyday, back in late last year. But we're actually approaching year-over-year declines in the price of Bitcoin. So the price is not the funnest thing to talk about these days, but it is what it is. I continually contend that if there's not a technical problem with Bitcoin, then it's really no big deal. If there's a technical reason why the price is declining, if there's some segment of the Bitcoin population that knows something I don't know, and they're selling based on the technical merits, like if they found some sort of technical flaw and they're quietly selling, then I'd be worried, but I don't think that's the case. I think what's more likely is there are big-time speculators involved that are able to manipulate the price. That combined with some market forces, for example, lots of retailers now getting involved in Bitcoins. Whenever somebody buys a Dell computer with Bitcoin or buys a big trip on Expedia, that usually triggers a sell order for Bitcoin, because those retailers need to sell their Bitcoins at the market rate at the time in order to fulfill those orders and pay their bills. You know, until we see a kind of a closed loop market on the Bitcoin economy, we can kind of be a victim of our own success in terms of the price, because every time a retailer sells something for Bitcoin, they're usually turning right around and selling it, which creates downward pressure on the price. If those merchants could turn around and pay their employees or turn around and pay their suppliers, then they wouldn't have to sell right away, and we'd have a more stable price. As we all know, Bitcoin stabilizes over time. The volatility is constantly improving, but it's not good enough for most retailers not to keep themselves from exposing themselves to that volatility, so they sell right away. So, well, possibly. Gold is highly manipulated, although it's easier to manipulate gold because there's a lot more paper representation of gold than there is paper representation of Bitcoin. But gold is widely known to be a highly manipulated market, and it is down as well. And that's on the back of some news from the Fed, which we're going to get into quite extensively tonight. But that's kind of the playbook. We see examples where we would expect the gold price to rise, but it doesn't, and it's coincident with some news that's, well, in my opinion, designed to manufacture the opinion held by most people, so that there's not a run on the bank. Because if there can be a run on gold, just like there can be a run on the bank. And when people want to trade their pieces of paper for actual gold in enough quantity, then well, that's when the problems happen. So there's a vested interest in the powers that be to keep people from being frightened, right? To say everything's fine, you don't need your actual gold, it's all in the vault, you don't need to actually claim it. And if people start to not believe that story, or if they believe that there's some sort of circumstances on the horizon where there might be a run, well, that's not good for the powers that be. So all that is speculation. Nobody really knows what's going on. It's at least in the Bitcoin world, it's open to the entire planet to buy and sell at will. And like I said, there's not yet. There's lots of plans in the works to create paper Bitcoin, and I can describe that probably at another time. But essentially, it makes it easier to manipulate. But we're not there yet. Okay. On the Indonesian exchange, we're hovering right around the 4 million IDR mark. The Indonesian rupiah, 4 million for one Bitcoin. So we've got maybe a bit of a psychological barrier there. If you look at the Bitcoin market overall, the Indonesian price is about 3% higher than the global average, right? You've got the global average of 328, and things are selling on the Indonesian exchange for about 330 USD. So it's an arbitrage opportunity for 0.001 Bitcoin. You can buy that Bitcoin. You can buy that much Bitcoin someplace else and sell it to this guy. He's paying a premium. So moving on. Normally at this portion of the evening, we do the Bitcoin number of the week with Will. Will is on a mission on Gili to find Bitcoin merchants. You can see he's found one here. This is kite surfing on Gili Island, available for Bitcoin. So he's not here to deliver the number of the week. I'm going to give it my best shot to fill his shoes, but those are big shoes to fill. I'll do my best. So Will, if you're listening, hang in there. We're looking forward to your return, and I'll do my best to do the number of the week. So what is the Bitcoin number of the week? Let's take a look. Bitcoin number of the week is 176,226. Does anybody have any idea what that number might represent in the world of Bitcoin? No guesses? Okay. 176,226 US dollars is how much it costs to get a money transmitter's license. And that's significant. We're going to get into the details of why that's significant. But if you want to do business as a United States, which means if you want to handle Bitcoins somehow for your customers or in any of your customer transactions, then you need a $176,000 license. Let's take a look at where I got that number from. This is the website of a law office that is Bitcoin friendly and publishes information based on this, on the regulatory environment that we find ourselves in the United States. And I know that we've got an international audience, but there's a lot of governments around the world that are looking at what the U.S. is doing in this regard. So it is significant. And also anybody who's contemplating a Bitcoin business will likely appeal to a U.S. customer. And that's why it's important to understand exactly what the U.S. regulations are doing, because other governments may follow suit, or if your business is looking to deal with U.S. customers, then you've got this regulatory burden to consider when you're setting up your business. So what they're saying is that in order to get your federal license and go through the rigmarole of all 53 states. Now, when I grew up, there were only 50 states. But there are 53 states and territories within the United States that fall under the federal jurisdiction of the United States. And in order to become a money transmitter in any of those places, you've got to pay this $176,000 fee and about $136,000, well, almost $137,000 per year to stay compliant. And presumably, this law firm has fees on top of that to give you that advice, to tell you you need to pay $176,000 this year and $138,000 next year, etc. Presumably, you also need staff, your own staff, to make sure you're compliant, to file all that paperwork, understand what those regulations are, etc., etc., etc. So I pulled this number up because we have recent rulings from FinCEN and from the SEC that if you're planning to do business in Bitcoin, you need one of these licenses. So that really rules out Steve Jobs in his garage, the next Steve Jobs in his garage, or the next Bitcoin innovation. You know, arguably for the last 50 years, we've had very little innovation in banking, and Bitcoin came along and shook everything up. Now we've got Apple Pay involved, and PayPal's getting involved, and big retailers are looking at how they can offer their goods and services for Bitcoin. We've got this whole Bitcoin 2.0 with smart contracts and the Internet of Things, all this innovation, and now the regulators are showing up and saying that if you want to play, you've got to pay some pretty hefty entrance fees. So anyway, I don't think it's good news, but we're going to talk about it. That's why I chose the number of the week, $176,226. So after I get done building my Bitcoin business here in Bali and I go back to the States to launch, I'll be passing the hat around. I need to raise at least 176,226, and then I don't know, maybe hire a few people on top of that. Let's call it around 200 grand. So I'll probably be leaving at this time next year. So if you guys could start saving up for when I leave, that'd be nice. All right.
But it doesn't seem so efficient that you have to apply in all the 53 states. There is no like central organization.
Well, there are central regulators, but there are also state level regulators. Some of them have no burden to entry, no money transmitter requirements. Others do, but yeah, you have to apply in 53 different states and territories in order to offer your goods and services to everybody. There's actually some really, I know it's regulation, so it's not that interesting, but it's kind of raising a lot of questions about how people do business online. I mean, this is, Bitcoin is the money of the internet. It allows for the commerce in the virtual world. And how do we match the virtual world to the physical world? I mean, I can throw up a website. Anybody on the planet Earth can see that website. If I'm selling something to somebody in New York, I need a bit license, right? And
Let's say setting up the company in some other country. And okay, not always, but if somebody is selling, let's say, digital products for e-commerce, we don't need to have like retail like in the US.
well, yeah, I mean, this is why things are so tricky. I mean, some non-American person could set up a non-American website and sell to a lot of non-Americans. And then if somebody in New York browses to your website and buys something, you could be subpoenaed in a New York court of law, and and presumably you can never. You can. Yes, yes. In fact, we saw recently, we covered this a few months ago, but Argentina defaulted on some of their debt, right? And some of those people were in the United States. They sued Argentina in a U.S. court. That's the new world we live in, where anybody on the planet can go find some jurisdiction to sue you in. And it's going to be tricky business. But, with Bitcoin, you're kind of on the cutting edge. If you were subpoenaed in a New York court and didn't show up and had a standing judgment against you or your company, then you might not be able to travel to the United States. We might not be able to visit the Big Apple. It's kind of it'd be a shame if that were the case. What many people are doing, what ends up happening is people leave that jurisdiction. If you were working on a Bitcoin startup and you're in New York, and all of a sudden you find yourself in an unfriendly environment, you might move to Panama, which has a friendlier environment. But even then, you've got to be careful. You might need to look at the IP addresses of the people that are visiting your site and block US IP addresses or something along those lines. So, well, hopefully that's not the world we're going to be living in, but regulators don't keep up with the pace of things. It's kind of like if you got a horse and buggy and there's a bunch of regulations about the horse, and you show up with a Ferrari, and all of a sudden you don't know how to match up what you've got with what's there. There's an interesting point in this story here that I'll highlight. Virtual currencies predated the Bitcoin, right? There was this Second Life, Linden Research. They created this video game called Second Life, and they had a currency within the game. And there ended up being a real world value for this virtual currency inside the game. You could go in and pay somebody inside the game, and then they could mail you something in the real world. So there was a real world exchange rate. They tried to apply for one of these licenses, and it took 9 months for them to get their license. So there's not only is there the regulatory burden, but there's also the bureaucracy of it all. And imagine waiting 9 months for the federal government, and then who knows how long for all 53 state governments to get back to you with your license. In the meantime, you're in some sort of kind of purgatory in terms of law and regulations and so on. I really feel like there could be a private regulatory environment, like perhaps there were private for-profit companies that offer regulatory services, and then a business could say to their customers, you can trust us because we subscribe to this private regulatory regime, right? So you don't need some government. You could have like 10 companies that are vying for the regulatory crown, if you will, where all businesses could subscribe to that company's governance, and we wouldn't need, you know, governments and their 9-month wait times to make consumers feel safe to do business with a company. Because that's really the service that government is trying to provide is, you know, we think there are scammers out there. We're going to protect you from the scammers by licensing everybody in this space. But, you know, we have a monopoly on that service. So if we take 9 months, it's kind of too bad. And, you know, the costs to that are really hard to gauge. You know, what companies don't get started, what people don't go into business, what innovation does not happen because that's the case. You never really know. But I really feel like there could be an environment where some of that is privatized, where there's, you know, I might want to do business as a consumer, and I might not know if a company is legitimate or not. And I wouldn't, if there was a reputable company that put their stamp of approval on it, like a consumer, I don't know, was it Consumer Advocate that rated those things, then that would be just as good as some government license.
There is, like if you want to get an ISO certification from a company,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to multiple different companies and it's certified by them.
Yeah, that's a great case in point. The ISO certification, which is big in Europe, and I think they have some things that are similar in the States, where it's a private company saying, yes, these people meet the certification. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so let's look at some of the news. The reason I chose that number is because this has been in the news. FinCEN guidelines label exchanges, payment processors as money transmitters. In the past, miners have also been labeled as money transmitters. And if you want to do business in this space, you need this license, this $176,000 license that I just mentioned. I pulled up this story because it's kind of an interesting phenomenon we're seeing. I mean, Bitcoin's really growing up, and we're starting to live in this world that's starting to look more and more like the old world, right? This guy, the former commissioner, ex-Securities and Exchange Commission chairman, Arthur Levitt, taking an interest in Bitcoin. Levitt announced was joining the advisory boards of 2 crypto companies. So this former SEC commission chairman is now going from the public sector, running the SEC, to the private sector. And this is something that we've seen. This is an old story. Back in 2008, when we had the global financial crisis, Hank Paulson was the Treasury Secretary. Where did he come from? Goldman Sachs. He was the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Go out, watch the movie Inside Job, and they lay it all out there. All of the financial instruments that, well, Goldman Sachs, under the purview of Hank Paulson, all the things they created, all the credit default swaps, and all of the derivatives, those were all created by him. Then all of a sudden, he's the Secretary of the Treasury. The global financial crisis happens, and who gets bailed out but all those people who created all those derivatives and monetary instruments, these financial rocket science that nobody understands. I think it's a dangerous situation when there's a revolving door between business and the government, and here we see it taking place in Bitcoin. You know, and he's saying things like, let's see, the intellectual firepower behind Bitcoin enterprises is astonishing, Levitt told the Wall Street Journal, but I think in terms of compliance and regulation, they're relatively immature. So basically, he's showing up in these Bitcoin companies and talking about how, you know, we need that $176,000 license. You know, this is kind of the game that's played, where the insiders get in there and they create regulations that and fees and licenses that make it impossible for smaller companies to get in there, and it just creates a chilling effect. So I'm sorry to report that, but that's the state of things these days. There's more stories that cover this. FinCEN rules Bitcoin payment processors exchanges are money transmitters. FinCEN, this is the area of the U.S. government that that regulates these things. Let me see what I want to highlight here. Okay, this is interesting. We encourage businesses to ask us directly if they are uncertain about their status as money transmitters and to determine if they need to register with FinCEN. Depending on the specific facts and circumstances described to us, we offer an official opinion. But this is government saying just ask us, and these are the same folks that take 9 months to give a company like Linden Labs a money transmitter's license. So it's really not that easy. It's easy to say that in an article, but if you tried to pick up the phone and call FinCEN and you're just a little startup or a single person, you know, you can see how that might be untenable. So I contend that this is all just not very good news for us. This could even be why the price has been declining. I posted a couple other good segments on here. This is a series published on CoinDesk by this guy Marco Santori. Marco Santori is a prominent lawyer in the Bitcoin space, advising Bitcoin companies. He's recently gone to blockchain.info, who recently raised $30 million in venture capital. Right, blockchain.info is the wallet that we advocate here. It's the one we teach people with in our Bitcoin 101 class. It's a great company. It's amazing how they do business. They're a great technology company, but now they've hired this big gun lawyer, right? And so they've raised $30 million and they've hired a really good lawyer. I mean, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. I mean, you need big bucks to start playing with big regulation. And I think companies are starting to see that that's what's necessary. And they're hiring people like Marco Santori. But smart guy, really good information here on Bitcoin regulations. This one was published back in August, but the second part of the series is from September, where he talks about money transmission licenses in all of the 50 states. So I would encourage you to take a look at this. Here's what I'm highlighting here. Thus, the application process is affectionately known among the industry professionals as a financial colonoscopy. This is how the top Bitcoin lawyer is describing what it takes to comply with the regulatory environment. I've had a colonoscopy. It's not pleasant. Presumably a financial colonoscopy would be a little bit better, but I don't know. There's a bullet list of all the things you need to offer. You know, I come from the payments industry, and I worked for a payments processor, and we did business globally, and it was amazing how much business we had to turn away because of the regulatory burden. You have things like the Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering rules, know your customer or KYC. We used to have to ask companies to give us their passport. Right, so we'd have their passport on file in order to transact business through the network that we provided, the company that I worked for. Incredibly intrusive, in my opinion. But these are things that we're used to. You know, money laundering is a term that we're used to thinking is a bad thing. But they could call it financial surveillance, and then we might see it in a different way. You know, money laundering, oh, they got Al Capone on money laundering. That's, of course, we don't want money laundering, but
you look at like the court system, that's just a money laundering system for the system, just to use the court system.
Well,
when you look at the logistics, that's what it does. So,
well, it's interesting how if you look up money laundering on Wikipedia, it's a very contentious page, and they make the point that the definition of money laundering has expanded. So it used to be that money laundering was taking money from an illegal source, like let's say you were selling booze during Prohibition, right? And then you made it look like you made it in a legitimate way. Like instead of selling booze, you were selling loaves of bread. to create a business and it looks like a bread shop, and oh boy, this is a really successful bread shop. They're selling bread like crazy. Well, really, they're just those are false transactions, and they're trying to make it look like they've earned that money legitimately. That was the original money laundering, you know, taking dirty money and making it clean. But they've adopted, they've gotten us to be afraid of the term altogether and linked it with terrorism, and there are references to money laundering in the Patriot Act, and there's just a broad definition of money laundering these days. And you know, words are important. Definitions are certainly important, especially when it comes to the law. And well, when you choose a term like money laundering versus financial surveillance, then people treat it differently. But it really is the same thing. You know, I'm perfectly willing to think that, you know, bad things are illegal, but I really question whether you know, moving money around, or you know, if I'm a financial institution and I don't report to the government that somebody transacted something greater than $10,000, I mean I think that's questionable whether that's illegal or not. I would question that, but mine is just one opinion. But it's interesting how we're entering this new world where all of the terms are being defined. Right, all of these terms are in the process of being defined. So I say question everything. You know, don't automatically assume that that something like money laundering is bad. Right. All right, moving along. Okay. So we've got the latest money conference is taking place in Vegas right now. And day one is all about regulators. Financial giants forecast Bitcoin's future. And again, it's kind of interesting that on the very first day, they're talking about regulation and the regulatory environment. And this guy Losky, he's the head financial regulator in New York and the author of the Bit license in New York. He's there. And he gave the keynote address, and here he's saying that in addition to announcing the creation of a so-called transition bit license framework, Losky outlined how regulators in his office both understand and respect that some digital currency startups will be more capable than others of meeting compliance and associated costs. So they pay a little bit of lip service to, you know, we don't want to stifle innovation, but you know, they're acknowledging that, you know, the burden is going to be too much, right? They also really, they go a long way towards perpetuating the use of digital currencies for illicit activities, and do their best at associating Bitcoin with like organizations, including some in the Eastern Bloc, which I don't know, is there anybody here from the Eastern Bloc? Yeah. So, you know, it's kind of this, I don't know, it's trying to evoke this kind of criminal element, or even associating whole geographies with nefarious business undertakings. I think it's really dangerous to kind of, well, in one instance, they're kind of lumping all these bad actors in with Bitcoin, and then they're, you know, identifying bad actors as coming from, you know, whole geographies on the planet. I think it's really, I don't know. Yeah, it's simplistic, but you know, people go for that. People respond to this kind of what I would call propaganda, and well, little guys like me kind of speak up about it. But and all of you have to make up your own mind. I mean, you know, smart people can disagree about the necessity of regulation, right? And I wouldn't want my grandmother to get burned by some shyster, and there are shysters out there. In fact, last week we talked about a big one in the Dogecoin world. So they are out there. They show up with around money and money things, and I guess the question is how best to deal with them. You know, I'm the optimist. I tend to see the best in people's nature. You know, I like to think that most people are honest, and that we don't want to stifle any innovation in the name of capturing a few bad actors. You know, the United States, when they were forming as a country, you know, they have the Fourth Amendment that prohibits illegal search and seizure unless you have probable cause. This is something that they felt strongly enough about to encode in the Constitution of the country. That said that, you know, a policeman cannot just walk up to you and try and find out something that you're doing illegal by searching you. You know, they can't walk into your house and, you know, search every drawer and, you know, find something to charge you with. They have to have probable cause, and that's a fundamental element of our personal freedom that allows us to walk around and not be harassed and live freely. And well, yeah, we're slowly giving up those rights, and without an amendment to the Constitution in the states. And I don't know exactly how these things come to pass in other countries. I've heard anecdotal stories about, you know, mass surveillance in Australia. I know there are lots and lots of closed circuit cameras in the UK, and you know, we're already, anyone who travels internationally gives up that right, you know, with body scanners, you know, in the name of being safe. So you know, it's the world we live in. It's good to understand these things. You know, there's a great article, and we've talked about it in the past, with the guys that began Skype. You know, Skype found themselves running afoul of regulators when they first began, right? Because all of these telecoms companies had to adhere to telecoms regulations, and along comes Skype, and they don't have to, so they can basically provide free internet calls all over the world for nothing. Most of you guys are quite young, but I can remember when it cost, you know, $1 or $2 per minute to call Europe, and now you can do it for free. This is the world that Skype found themselves in. You know, all of these incumbent players being threatened by the new technology, and threatening to sue, and, you know, appealing to legislators. And so one of the founders, I forget his name, wrote a really interesting piece comparing the early days of Skype to the current days in Bitcoin. And essentially the story that he told around Skype was they became so useful so quickly that the regulators just couldn't flip the switch and turn them off. So hopefully Bitcoin will become useful enough and widespread enough before, you know, the regulations stifle the innovation. Well, I thought there was something else in here that I wanted to share. There's Marco Santori again. Anyway, it's a good read. All these links, incidentally, will be in the show notes, so you can take a look at them after the fact. So here's this guy Losky again. He's the head regulator in New York. He's the person behind the bit license. And what was semi-friendly about the way they're going about it is they put out the proposed legislation for comment. And of course, the Bitcoin community responded first with asking for an extension, because I think he only gave people 90 days or something. So he granted an extension, and he's doing this thing called a transitional bit license. So essentially, he's introducing what they're calling risk-based regulation. So if you're a company of a certain size with a certain number of employees, then you can apply for a baby license, which isn't as expensive. And then when you get to be a big boy, and you can pay the big fees, then you can get a full bit license. So I guess this is a good thing if you buy into the whole, you know, state licensing paradigm. It's a little bit more friendly than the $176,000 money transmitters license that FinCEN says that you need. Incidentally, this is a different regulator. This is a state-based regulator, not a federal regulator. And he's talking about a bit license, not a money transmitter license. But in any case, it's slightly friendlier. But really, it's a Faustian bargain, in my opinion. You know, it's like, do you want the bad choice or the really bad choice? Oh, you just want the bad choice. Okay, go ahead. We'll give you the transitional bit license instead of the bit license, instead of the option of nothing, which I think is the best thing for innovation now. And let the buyer beware, at least for now. But again, I'm only one guy. And you know, if I was going to start my business in New York, I would comply with the regulations, because that's the world we live in. But I can still complain about it.
Do you know the contents of this regulation? What they introduced? Have they published anything yet?
They have. There are, you know, there's a whole big stack of papers that outlines the bit license, but it's things like you need security experts on your staff. You need to collect 10 years worth of transactional history on all of your customers. You need to collect identifying information about all of your customers. If there are any suspicious activity on any of your accounts, you need to report that. Incidentally, Charlie Shrem, one of the folks, the early Bitcoin pioneers, he was on the Bitcoin Foundation board and started a Bitcoin company called BitInstant. He's featured in the documentary, The Rise and Rise of Bitcoin. He faced federal charges because he failed to file a suspicious activity report from his business. So, you know, you start this business and you start having all of your customers, you got an internet business, who knows who all these people are that you're doing business with, you know, and you know, you then have the burden to file a suspicious activities report. And if you don't, you could have an ankle bracelet on, right? And have to live at your parents' house for 6 months until you get a court date. You know, it's pretty gnarly. But this is why, you know, companies are doing what they call regulatory arbitrage and locating their businesses in places like Panama instead of the United States, right? And you know, flipping a switch and banning all IP addresses that come from the United States, or asking their customers to click a button if you're from New York and then saying, sorry, we can't serve you. I don't know if any of you guys have tried to use Pandora here in Indonesia, but they're, you know, if you pull up the Pandora site, it says, we're sorry, we can't serve music in this jurisdiction. It's like it's the same thing. There's a geographic limit to a virtual thing. I think it's something that people 100 years from now will look back and laugh at. But again, you know, I feel like I can see the world we should be living in, and then I kind of am bummed out by the world we actually live in. But it's up to all of us to, I don't know, do what we can to shape public opinion, right? All right. Here's just another reference to this ex-SEC Chairman Levitt to advise 2 Bitcoin companies. This is something in the Wall Street Journal. These companies are, this one is Atlanta-based BitPay, and yeah, presumably this guy's got a really big salary, and he's got a lot of friends in government, and can grease the skids, so to speak. This is kind of interesting. This is Bill Gates kind of chiming in on the whole thing at this American Banker website. I get a little newsletter from them every once in a while. There's something interesting, but there's some good quotes down here at the bottom. And again, he's advocating for this risk-based regulation, which means like if you're a little guy, you need a little bit of regulation. If you're a big guy, you need more regulation. So he's saying, at what level of transaction or transaction type will the government insist on detailed records being there and being available to them? And then what transaction types are simply allowed on an anonymous basis? Gates said during a question and answer session at Sibos, which is another big money conference in Europe, I believe. We need the US, which sets the tone for these things, to think about that. He went on, we've got to make sure that regulations actually don't favor the dark economy over this world. There's a little bit of uncertainty or, say, correspondent bank relationship that facilitate low-cost remittances. People will feel the risk level is such that they basically get rid of that, and you end up with either in the banks. God, I'm having trouble here. Basically get rid of that, and you end up either in banks that are not connected with the US financial system or simply cash transfer activity. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that for most illicit activity, people are using US printed paper $100 bills. This is where the lion's share of this illicit dark market activity takes place. You can if you have a briefcase, you can have more than $1 million if they're all $100 bills. And we covered this in a old episode, but 80% of the U.S. $100 bills the U.S. government does not know where they are, and they are not in the U.S. banking system. They are being used to transact business around the world, and well, Bill Gates says at least with cryptocurrencies you can track them. So it's funny how Bitcoin gets a bad rap because it's associated with anonymity, but it pales in comparison to the U.S. dollar in that regard. If you really want to be anonymous, use U.S. cash, and if you want to buy drugs, cash works pretty well too. And when I was in LA, I tried to go buy some drugs in Skid Row with Bitcoin, and it just wouldn't work. I needed to use cash. Okay. Anyway, check out that story with Bill Gates chiming in on the road ahead. So not only did the FinCEN and those folks chime in on new regulation in terms of money transmitters, but the SEC is also sending inquiry letters to hundreds of Bitcoin companies, many of whom are doing business on the Counterparty platform. We've talked about Counterparty in the past. And actually, we've talked about projects here in Bali of creating, we were talking about creating a recycle coin and then incentivizing people to pick up garbage and turn in their garbage. And then we give them a recycle coin that we create. But in the United States, that's creating a financial asset. That's a security. And as such, it needs to be regulated. So the SEC is sending letters to all of these businesses that have created digital assets using the Counterparty platform. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever gotten a letter from the U.S. government, saying that you've now entered their compliance regime, it's just not fun. It's just not a good thing. It's not a good day when you get a certified letter from the government. I don't know how it is in your country, but in the States, it's no bueno. Well, they were busy licking stamps at the SEC recently, sending out a bunch of letters, and I feel bad for these companies. A lot of these companies have good ideas, good business ideas, and this kind of puts the kibosh on that. Here's a kind of an enumeration of the things that are necessary that you need to keep. Once you get these letters, you need the original letters, correspondence, inter-office communications, slips, tickets, records, worksheets, financial records, accounting documents, bookkeeping documents, your mother's underwear, reports, manuals, telephone logs, telegrams. The list goes on and on. Imagine if you can't find your notices or your minutes or your, I don't know, purchase orders. Yeah. Aren't you glad you're in Bali? I drive a scooter with no insurance here. What's that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's amazing when you think that in the end, what's really happening with most of these things is one person is doing something for another person, and they're just exchanging. They're just trading something. I mean, in barter, it was a chicken for a pair of shoes, right? But we made it a little bit easier by creating cash. And there's some. We're sitting in Bali, and there's some people in New York that are saying, what are you giving that person? You can't do that. And
But wait, if you're silly enough to believe, that's the thing. Most people just this really do that.
Well, I mean, but there are real world consequences. These people have guns. They have cells. This guy Charlie Shrem, nice kid. He actually, this guy Losky, it wasn't really covered in the documentary, but I read about it. He proactively met with Losky and opened up the books for his company and showed, was cooperative, assuming that the government really just wanted to learn how best to protect the public. And people like Losky, government prosecutors can make a name for themselves by nailing people and by anyway, they have their own set of motivations that don't necessarily comport with the best interest of everybody.
Part of the opposition to Bitcoin is comes from trying to protect the US dollar as well. So currency. I mean, I know Bitcoin's very small compared to world reserve currencies, but a lot of countries like China, Russia want to undermine US dollar.
This is true. There's a huge transition period taking place where the dollar as the world's reserve currency is seriously threatened, ironically, by the US's own policies. It kind of makes you wonder what's going on here. We've seen this in the past with the German government post-World War I simply inflating away all of their debts through hyperinflation. The US government has a lot of debts, and if those debts are denominated in dollars and dollars are worth a lot less, then those debts are effectively reduced. So, but the only problem is it creates a monetary crisis, and you've got to move to a new monetary system with a new global reserve currency. There is the IMF's currency waiting in the wings to take that role. There's also Bitcoin that could take that role. But yes, you make a good point that that there is, the status quo is definitely being threatened here, and well, that's why a lot of regulators are involved, and that's why that's frankly why we're interested in it. It'd be nice if money was boring, but it just so happens to not be boring because the whole world is going through a financial metamorphosis. That actually is a good segue into the next thing I want to talk about. I'll skip some of these because we're starting to run out of time. The FOMC, the Federal Reserve, recently announced that they're ending quantitative easing. Here comes the end of QE. But wait a second, this story is from January. This is almost a year old. What? Here comes the end of QE. Well, again, the Fed has said they're ending QE. If you look at I've shown this graph quite a bit. You guys are familiar with this. This is the money supply, and this is 2008. Danger, Will Robinson. Any eighth grader could see that there's something different in the graph. This is incidentally is a long time frame. This is over the course of my lifetime, and then here is something's not right here. This is QE. This is QE1 right here. QE2. QE3. Quantitative easing. It's a nice word, a nice non-threatening term for money printing. This is increasing the money supply. We've quadrupled the money supply since 2008 from just under $1 trillion to about $4 trillion. This is not. The problem is a lot bigger than this. This is only $4 trillion, but this money is provided basically for free to the primary dealers, who then loan that money out at a 9-to-1 ratio, which then comes back to the conventional banking system, which they loan it out at a 9-to-1 ratio. All of this is in the name of creating inflation and stimulating the economy. And essentially, it's not working, but they can't go on printing money forever. So they're basically saying we're going to,
So house prices gone down to like 20% of what they were back in 2008?
No, because because interest rates. Let me see where's this other graph.
If there's 5 times as much money, then doesn't that mean every dollar is worth a fifth of what it was before?
Well,
so the house prices would go up by 5%.
Well, housing prices have gone up because this red line is the effective federal funds rate, or the rate at which the government loans money. This is also 2008, and you can see it's been at 0 since 2008. So this is the other lever that the federal government has at their disposal. They can print money, and they can control the interest rate. So interest rates are at zero. So a bank can actually borrow money overnight and at zero and get an overnight rate on the open market and make money without doing anything, right? And then that trickles down into the rate that on your car loan, the rate on your home loan, and if money is free, then prices are inflated. That's how a bubble is created. So that's why houses are more expensive, because interest rates have been at zero since 2008.
But are they 5 times more expensive?
No.
So where's the money gone?
Well, this is just the United States, and we export our inflation, right? We're doing this in the United States, but the whole world relies on the U.S. dollar, right? So basically, that inflation goes overseas, right? We're paying China, for example, for all that plastic crap that you see that shows up at Walmart. We're paying them in dollars, right? And so we're effectively exporting our inflation. As soon as the world realizes that and changes their prices, then the inflation comes back. But until that happens, we don't see it. In fact, it's quite, that we're talking about massive forces here.
So if someone hasn't increased their housing price by 500%, then they're actually selling it a lot cheaper than they would have been if you
Right. Well, yeah, except that you won't get a buyer because the public sentiment doesn't match the price. But yes, that will happen when those dollars come home. When people start using something other than the dollar as the world's reserve currency, then that's when you have people showing up, and this is happening now. Chinese businessmen are showing up with suitcases full of money and buying, skyscrapers in New York, right? And so there are skyscrapers sitting empty in the middle of Manhattan because some dollars have come from overseas and they want to get out of the dollar and into something that they think will more closely track the value of that thing. So as that happens, and as the demand for the dollar wanes, and it's already happening. People can now buy oil for something other than a dollar as a reserve currency. We've got a new development bank between the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So they can settle their balance of accounts without getting into the dollar. So there's less demand for dollar, and that inflation will come home to roost. And when it does, housing prices will be 5 times higher. And some people will be like, I'm rich, my house is worth 5 times as much. But no, you're not, because it's inflation and not real demand.
A lot of the QE money is going to stock market bubble.
Are you a plant? Did we talk before this? No? Okay. I just wanted to make that clear. Here's the S&P 500, right? And again, it's amazing how similar these graphs look, but we're graphing something totally different, right? This is the S&P 500 stocks on the U.S. stock market. Again, over the course of my lifetime, pretty normal. We're good, guys. But what happens when monetary policy changes? This is the tech bubble running up to 2000. This is when everybody was trying to fix that Y2K bug. It's all these technology companies. Did you guys ever see the movie Office Space? Yeah. I think it's worth it. We got Office Space out of the deal. That's a good movie. So this is the tech bubble, and then wah. And then we got the housing bubble, right? And this is 2008, and oh no, tragedy. And now look at this. This is what has happened since 2008. We're up at record highs, right? And it's not real value. It's the same thing with houses. People are like, oh man, my portfolio, life is great. My portfolio is doing awesome. And that's actually the psychological effect that Ben Bernanke and Janet Yellen are trying to evoke in the US population. They're trying to make them feel richer. Take a look at your stock portfolio. Don't you feel rich? Maybe you should go out and buy that car or buy that new house or take that vacation. And that actually worked during the housing bubble. But now it's like once bitten, twice shy. People are not doing that. And instead, they're not investing in real things. They're investing in the stock market. And if you look, there's another story here. There's an analysis about how companies are buying back shares in their own companies because they can there are multiple benefits. They're outlined here, but it's kind of this weird shell game where you can say, we're so bullish about our own company that we're buying our own stock back. Isn't that great? And they can make that announcement. They get a PR boost. They can borrow money at next to nothing and even buy even more stock, which makes their stock price go up. They create their own demand for their own stock. Companies, what is it? 3.8 trillion in stock buybacks and dividends out of 4 trillion in cumulative net income. So all of these companies are turning right around, and instead of creating a new factory or coming up with a new product or investing their money in something their own company creates, they're at almost 90% just buying back their own stock, right? And giving all of their executives a bonus because their stock price went up. I mean, it's the same thing with what Wall Street did when they were selling all of those derivatives and credit default swaps and selling insurance that they didn't have the money to pay on, and then paying bonuses based on that perceived performance. And then, well, when this stock bubble bursts, when this thing comes down, those bonuses will have already been paid. It's just like 2008.
It's piracy.
Well, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I'm no populist. Like, I really don't want to sound like I'm some sort of conspiracy theorist or some sort of like inciting populist uprising, but it really is. There's a reckoning coming, and well, it's good to know sooner than later. So this is the S&P 500. This is the Dow Jones, and this is on a smaller scale. This is the 3-month. But there was all this talk about quantitative easing coming to an end, and this is what happens when they start to make these announcements. And by the way, this is just tapering. This isn't ending it. They're saying that we're gonna trim it back. The stock market reacts, and this is the reaction. But wait, we've got this. We're going back up again. What's going on here? As the Fed leaves the QE party, Japan tops up the punch bowl. We've got this recent announcement that that Japan is now entering into their own money printing endeavors, and they're going to keep the printing presses going, which means there's still cheap money around, which means international bankers can buy Japanese bonds at an extremely low interest rate and turn that around and buy U.S. stocks or other equities or assets, and the party continues until it doesn't. So I'm sorry, guys. Pretty grim picture tonight. I don't mean to be such a pessimist, but
Why is he grim? Okay.
Why am I grim?
Why is he grim?
Why is it a bad picture? Well,
But it could be a good picture because if the U.S. dollar plummets.
that's true, Marcus. In my opinion, I mean, Bitcoin is my own personal way to opt out, or my own repudiation of the system as it stands. I can buy gold, and that doesn't have any counterparty risk. I can buy Bitcoin, and that doesn't have any counterparty risk. But we started off talking about all of the Bitcoin regulations and all of the chilling effects that are upon us around the innovation. So as that happens, I think it becomes less and less attractive as an alternative. Where globally we're moving into a new monetary system. Bitcoin represents a new monetary system, but the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, likely has their own ideas about what will happen when the dollar fails. There's an international currency that the IMF maintains called special drawing rights. It's called the SDR. The IMF currently has a clean balance sheet. They haven't deflated the SDR by trillions of dollars like the US dollar has. So, when the next time that the globe has an international crisis, everybody's got their hair on fire, the IMF can swoop in and say, oh, well, we can be the lender of last resort. We'll buy your dollars for pennies on the dollar. We'll buy we'll take care of all your obligations denominated in special drawing rights. And don't worry, everything's fine. But in the meantime, there's this giant sucking sound between my mom, who has saved her whole life and has most of her money in cash, and that cash is, you know, now worth pennies on the dollar.
The good news is the Costa Gambles just put a video out that's a bit exciting.
Oh yeah,
You need to see the video.
is this the guy who did the Thrive movement?
Yep,
He's got a new video.
There's a family called the Dragon Family with something that's just going to swoop in and save the world.
The Dragon Family.
Yeah, it's a good video. It's not listed publicly on YouTube, but it's gone viral on Facebook.
Oh really? So this is one of the kids of the Procter and Gamble dynasty. He went rogue and started this thing called the Thrive movement, which is advocating decentralized everything, food and energy and money.
And Patricia Coder-Robles, who's a bit of a psychic, says that the world is going through a great cleansing at the moment. So all of this shit is coming to the surface to be seen.
Yeah.
So in a way, it feels to me like, you know, if you want to get more physical about it, that the good guys are letting all the bad guys go, putting them out rope so that they can hang themselves, and then they're going to come in and just clean the whole thing up. You know, they're just stimulating the collective consciousness of the people.
Yes.
Saying, that's it. We don't want this anymore. You know, it's time for change. So
Yeah.
it's the perfect storm.
Yep. Change is coming, and you know, I really acknowledge you guys for taking an interest in this stuff. I mean, we were talking about regulation and money, arguably boring topics, but
also I think regulation could be good because then the big players from Wall Street can start up businesses in Bitcoin, and it could be more easily accessible for regular people.
Well, yeah, I mean, you make a good
I'm
point.
looking for like a fund where I could put like pension money into Bitcoins.
Yes.
It would be very easy to set up for a bank, but I haven't found any fund like that.
Well, there are funds that if they aren't available yet, they're soon to be available. The Winklevoss twins are working on just such a thing. These are the guys that were made famous in the movie about Facebook. The twins, the Winklevoss twins, are creating an exchange-traded fund that tracks the price of Bitcoin, and that allows institutional investors to get involved. That creates, in effect, paper Bitcoin, though, which then allows fractional reserve banking with Bitcoin. And then, well, that's part of what has created the mess in other markets like gold, where the price is manipulated based on paper and not the real asset. But
on the stock markets.
yeah. I'm sorry, say again?
Well, if the Winkler brothers develop that exchange-traded fund, then they'll buy them on the stock market.
That's right. That's right. And pension funds will be able to buy those. And incidentally, you know, if you go to Wall Street, they have this term called the dumb money, and this is the money from the pension funds. You know, the Arkansas Teachers Union, you know, has $3 million of, you know, all these teachers who have worked their whole life. They got their pension. They show up on Wall Street and they're like, help us. You know, we got a negative interest rate at our local credit union, and you know, Wall Street comes in and says, oh, I've got something for you. You know, how about some mortgage-backed securities? They're rated AAA by, you know, Standard & Poor's. You know, this is, unfortunately, that's the kind of stuff that goes on. But anyway, sorry to be a bummer if you interpret it that way. I think there is a silver lining. I mean, if you're ready for it, you know, if all this does happen, your Bitcoins will be worth way more than they are today. So Bitcoin is the safety valve for some of us. And it's good that we're all paying attention. But that's all the time we have. Thanks for coming tonight, guys. And we'll see you next week, same time, same channel. All right.
So would you diversify your portfolio